Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much to Bettina and everybody for inviting me to participate in this very exciting symposium. I am Nadia Kanagawa, and my presentation today is Challenges and Opportunities in Exploring the Networks of Izumi Province in the Diary of Kujo Masamoto from 1501 to 1502. This is really more about a project to be than it is about an existing project, but we are excited nonetheless. So I'm going to briefly introduce the Japan Past and Present Tabihikitsuke reading group, and then talk kind of briefly about what we see as the possibilities and then some of the challenges we've faced in trying to think about how to incorporate data from a 16th century courtier diary into the JBDB. So first, just briefly, the reading group is sponsored by and hosted and kind of housed within the Japan Past and Present Project, or JPP. So I wanted to briefly introduce that. JPP started out as part of the Yanai Initiative for Globalizing Japanese Humanities at UCLA and Waseda, and is now kind of its own, still connected, but its own thing. And as you can see in our mission statement, Japan Past and Present is a global information hub and repository that promotes research and teaching in the Japanese humanities across all kinds of borders, disciplinary, temporal, and geographic. And one of our key goals is to develop this kind of online hub that will allow for more equitable access to resources for teaching and scholarship so as to make a kind of more inclusive and diverse field. And we really see this reading group as part of that project. So we want to make infrastructure that fosters more international collaboration and creates opportunities for new voices. And yeah, so the way that we've set up this group is kind of in furtherance of those goals. So the Masamoto Koku Tabihikitsuke reading group is a Zoom-based reading group that falls under the sort of pre-modern Japan collaborative at JPP. We have 3 different collaboratives. They're kind of temporally based, and this one is in the pre-modern collaborative. The group is led by Lee Butler, and then Paula Curtis and myself are the organizers, so we kind of coordinate all the meetings. And on a basic level, we just meet regularly, usually every 2 weeks, to transcribe, translate, and annotate different selections from the text. And as we go, we've also been creating and maintaining a variety of different guides and resources to facilitate reading and interpreting the text, both for ourselves and for anybody else out there who might want to read the text. And as of now, there's quite a bit of information on our site. There's not the annotated translations that we've completed. We're done with, say, like maybe 20 or 30 different documents or diary entries. They're not yet up on the site. We are working with our development team to create what we hope will be a very exciting calendar-based display format where you can see what dates in these 4 years there are calendar entries and then which of those we've translated, but that is pending. So it is coming soon. What were our goals in making this group, and how does this relate to JPP's project? Basically, the idea here was that we wanted to create a non-institutionally based reading group that would allow whoever wanted to join to practice reading hentai kanbun and translating it. We know that there are a lot of opportunities to do that if you're in a graduate school in Japan, per se, or just in Japan in general, but you kind of have to know someone to get into these groups. And so we wanted to make a group that would allow a very wide swath of people who may not be located in Japan or may not have those networks. We wanted to let them have access to this process and this experience of kind of a community of people reading a text together. And then our other aim in creating the group was to increase access to and knowledge of what we think is a really uniquely interesting and important medieval primary source. So why Tabihikitsuke? What makes this so uniquely interesting and valuable? To be honest, part of the reason that we chose this is simply because Lee Butler was willing to lead the group, but he has a very compelling case for why this is a particularly worthwhile text to read. So first, it's quite a lengthy text. It's almost 350 pages in published form. It covers 4 years of Masamoto's stay in Hine estate. So he had come from the capital, former chancellor of the imperial court, left Kyoto to stay on his estate in Izumi province, primarily because there were a couple of military governors who were sort of encroaching on the estate. And so by being physically present, he aimed to regain full control of the estate for the Kujo family. So that's why he's there. And then he has this diary that he keeps the whole time that he's there. And it is kind of unparalleled in the view that it offers of village life and regional politics and economics at this time. Its detailed portrayal of rural culture and society, of the lives of individual villagers and their communities, and of the various machinations of the military governors and religious institutions in the area is pretty singular in its depth. So he really gets into the detail of how all of this is going on. The diary also kind of depicts a diversity of social classes, which is rare for a courtier diary. So it extends all the way from Masamoto and various influential monks and government officials, all the way to village elites and kind of peasants at the margins of society. So a lot of the individuals, even in the kind of lower levels of this society, are named in the text. So they become kind of important characters. The other thing that is quite important and useful in the text is that it includes a lot of correspondence. So Masamoto often copies in letters, either that he wrote or that he just simply has access to. Quite a bit of it is to and from villagers, and then he's also copying and reports that he gets from his various associates and people that he's talking to. So he really, like, it's honestly very surprising how much information and correspondence he had access to. It's often correspondence that he's not really party to. So all of this makes it a pretty valuable text. So we sent out a call asking people to join via PMJS, the Pre-Modern Japan listserv, and other relevant lists. And we now have a pretty stable group of, say, like 15 to 20 people, sometimes smaller, sometimes larger, who are regularly attending. And we have issued subsequent calls and plan to keep doing that. And one of the things we're really happy about with this group is that it's a really wide range of members. So we have tenured and emeritus faculty from various major institutions, but we also have independent scholars, contingent faculty, junior tenure track faculty members, postdocs, graduate students, and at least one extremely enthusiastic undergraduate student. And the members are all across the world. So we have people, a variety of people who've been in Japan at different points across the United States, Canada, Hawaii, Germany, the United Kingdom, Switzerland, and I think most recently we have members that have joined from Russia. So it's an eclectic group of people who've come together to read this. And then this is just a view of some of the existing resources that we have on our site, a guide to selected historical figures and a guide to selected historical locations. And these are both live on the Japan Past and Present site, but they're basically just lists. They're like documents with lists of these things. So we think that through our engagement with JBDB, we can kind of improve on or add to these resources. So our objectives in engaging with JBDB are fairly straightforward, but the first of those is just we want to get further insight into the connections and relationships that allowed Kujo Masamoto to manage and maintain control of his Izumi province estate. So he really has to deploy kind of his whole network and understand the networks around him in order to kind of regain control of this territory or this domain. And so we get a sense of that through the diary, but we think that JBDB will give us a better visualization and sense of that. We also wanted to explore the challenges and possibilities of network analysis and the data structure for complicated pre-modern texts like this. And then kind of in the background, we're really hoping that we can act as a kind of pilot project for future pre-modern, medieval, even earlier classical groups who want to take advantage of some of the tools that JBDB offers. We think it's super valuable and very exciting, but we also know that some kind of pre-modernists are a little either intimidated or just hesitant to do the startup work of engaging with what they might perceive as a tool that has mostly modern or early modern projects right now. So we hope that if we can start working with the tool and putting in kind of requesting and putting in categories that are relevant to Tabihikitsuke, that will then make it more possible for others working on similar texts to join. So our hope is that we can help lessen a barrier to entry for other medieval projects. So in terms of how we aim to use JBDB or to engage with it, there's a couple of really major possibilities that we see, and perhaps these are obvious, but they're exciting for us. The first is just that there are a lot of intersecting networks at play in Hine Estate, and tracking these networks is really key to understanding how Masamoto is gaining control and maintaining control of the estate. It's also key to just being able to read the text at all, but to give you a sense of the key players who are involved, On the one hand, you have Kujo Masamoto and his various officials and intermediaries of various different levels and types, who are all kind of communicating with each other. And then you have the two military governors and their various associates, officials, and intermediaries who are kind of, from Masamoto's view, scheming to control this land that he believes is his. Negoruji Temple, which is in the neighboring province of Ki, is also involved in this competition and not really on either of those sides very clearly. And beyond that, there's also the deputy shogun in Kyoto, his officials and intermediaries. The local notables or villagers are key players here and often appear in the documents, and then an assortment of other religious institutions like Muhen Koin, etc. So at present, we have that kind of list of key figures that we use as a reference, but a visualization of these different networks and their hierarchical structure and which members of which organization are communicating with each other would really help us in both translating the documents and kind of identifying key nodes in the networks, as well as strengthening kind of the people that we already have some sense are pretty critical, but just being able to visualize it may help us understand exactly how they are important and where. And it's often not the highest level people who are most frequently actually communicating. So those are the kinds of things that we hope to clarify through engaging with JBDB. One other key area that we think we could kind of really benefit from the tool is in spatial visualization. So Hine Estate, which is where Masamoto travels, is in Izumi province. It's one of the 5 home like Kinai region provinces, about 100 kilometers from Kyoto. And within that, this is a map that Paula made of some of the key places that regularly appear in the document. So among them, we have Hine and Iriyamada villages, where Masamoto set up his base in Iriyamada village because it's kind of better protected. There's also Sakai, which is a key base for the military governors. You have Negoruji Temple down here in neighboring Ki province. So people and documents are constantly moving between these places in the diary, as well as these kind of local regional places and the capital, right? Like they're going back and forth, telling on each other to the deputy shogun. So what we would ideally like to do is track both the people and the documents, and try to understand those alongside major events that are described in the diary. So among them, there's a very dramatic kidnapping and then an escape that happens where some villagers are taken by the military governor. So events like that, along with the movement of people and documents, we hope will give us a better sense of which places are critical to controlling the estate. And then also, how do local places and central institutions connect, and how do those how can we use this mapping function to consider the intersection of local and central concerns in Hine Estate? So we've run into a couple of challenges, even as we just start thinking about how to incorporate our data into the JBDB. What I'm getting from everybody else's presentations is that these are not unique challenges. However, they have maybe sort of a uniquely medieval flavor or something like that. So the particular way in which medieval people don't fit neatly into categories is, hopefully I can give you a sense of that. So that is our biggest problem, is that some of the existing categories are a little bit tricky for us to wrap our minds around. And I thought I would offer just one case study of a figure who's quite important and appears regularly in the documents. This figure is called Aoki Tosanyudo. He was a local agent or daikon for the part of the domain that belonged to Tominokoji Toshimichi, also appears frequently, who was a Kujo household official or keishi. So Aoki Tosanyudo is a really key player in managing the domain. He handles various financial affairs, he hires workers, he settles farmers' complaints, etc. But if we start thinking about how to categorize him, we immediately ran into some questions. So is daikon his title? It's certainly a way that it's like, he is a daikon. So how do we think about that? Is it his title? It's not a title in the sense of like a court title. But it is a position that he occupies. Is it his profession? Or could you call this a particular type of non-kinship relation? And then once you're done thinking about that for daikon, what about keishi? How does that work? Where does that fit? The other thing you might ask is he a courtier? He certainly serves a person who serves a courtier. Does that make him a courtier? Is he a warrior? He sometimes, he and others who are not clearly warriors do sometimes address issues using arms or force. So does that make them a warrior? Or he's Aokito-san Yudo, so maybe he's some kind of religious figure. Or is he all of the above, or none of these really apply? So these are some of the questions that we ran into very quickly as we started trying to think about how to put our people into the format, into the kind of Excel spreadsheets, for example. A couple other questions that we've been pondering: how do we handle status in an era where there really aren't clear or consistent boundaries between categories? We thought about this a lot with warrior, for example. Is that best understood as a status? Or is it really like a type of relationship? Like A is the warrior of B person? Can you even really talk about there being a warrior status at this time? There are some people who clearly, like, their main activity is fighting with arms, sort of. But it's sort of a spectrum, right? There's those people who are like, yeah, that's mostly what they do. And then there are many people who occasionally participate in military actions, but are otherwise not really fighting. And then there are people who serve in warrior bureaucracies, but their actual activities are not fighting at all. So who of those are warriors and why, and how do we draw those lines? Similarly, we've struggled with Keishi, as I mentioned before. And then we have terms that are very difficult for us in translation, but by the same token, we're not sure how JBDB can be used to account for terms like shugo or jito or hyakusho. So military governor, you could translate all these different ways. Hyakusho in particular, unclear how we should translate that, because over the hundreds of years in which this term is used, it means very different things in very different times. So we think that the problem is really just making a decision about what matters. So our aim in including Tabi Hikitsuke in JBDB, or elements of its data from it, is simply to try to request and create categories that most authentically and accurately reflect the reality of Tabi Hikitsuke. And we hope that in doing that, we will make it much easier for other medieval projects to join us and to contribute to JBDB and kind of begin to take advantage of some of these really powerful tools for this time period. And with that, thank you. That's it.